doing all this work that will take us maybe 20 minutes or 10 minutes, we can do this in 10 seconds. Okay. If you have been with me before in one of my in Business to 99, then you must have heard me saying that if I ask you about the two things that you learn in Excel and will make you proficient in Excel, that will be great for you to be able to use Excel. The two things you will want to learn include the basic functions of Excel, so counts, average, and so on. And the second thing is pivot tables. Okay. So now we are going to start talking about pivot tables. We will learn what are pivot tables, how they are used, when they are used, and the tricks and small things we can play around in pivot tables. Okay. So what is a pivot table? A pivot table is a table that is a tool that Excel provides to summarize data on different levels. So we can summarize data in different ways, and we can create charts, and we can create reports in no time at all. We can create charts and reports in seconds, right? And this is very interesting because in today's decision-making environment, this is how managers like to make decisions. They like to be able to play around with data and come up with new insights and use these insights to make decisions. Okay, so pivot tables are very powerful. They are easy to use, and they can make you look really good in front of your management and your customers. Okay, so let's work with pivot tables and let's understand what they do and how we can use pivot tables. Okay, so I'm going to use pivot tables in the same file, so we'll be using the same file that we have here. Okay, and I want to explain how to create a pivot table and how to use it. Okay, I will go as slow as I can, guys, but if there is anything you missed, let me know and I will re-explain it. Okay, so how to create a pivot table? Okay, to create a pivot table, you need first to select any cell inside your data. So you can click any cell inside the data anywhere, and then you go to insert and then click pivot table. Okay, this dialog box will show up for you. At the top of the dialog box, you will see that your data has been selected. So this is a range of all your data, including column names. Okay, so you will see that all our data is selected from A3 to L428, which is all our data. You must make sure that your data is selected correctly. If it is not, you need to select it manually. Okay. The second option you see below here is where do you want to create the pivot table? Is it in the same sheet or in a new worksheet? In 95% of the cases, we use a new worksheet because report looks nicer when it's in a different sheet. But you can create it in the same sheet if you need to. But we'll leave it as a new worksheet. Okay. Then I'm going to press OK. Okay. When I press OK, I will end up with this sheet that you see in front of you. It has two parts. Okay, so the pivot table has two parts. The part on the left is where we are going to see the report. This is where the report is created. Okay. The right-hand side is where the magic happens. This is where we play around with data and make magic happens, right? At the top, you will find a list of all column or field names in our data. So this is a list of all column and field names in our data. And below that, you will find 4 quadrants, one called filters, one called columns, one called rows, and one called values. Okay. So how do we use pivot tables? Okay. Let's assume that we want to do the report we just did. I want to do the report that I just did, the frequencies report. So I want to do exactly this. I want to get the frequencies of each loan purpose. So let's see how we do it in 5 seconds or less using the pivot table. Right? The first thing is we select the categories we want to summarize the data by. We want to summarize the data by the loan purpose. So I will click on loan purpose and I will drag it down to rows. So I will click it and drag it down to the rows section of the pivot table. Okay. Automatically, without me doing anything, all the categories are displayed for me. So all the loan purposes are displayed for me automatically. Nothing, there is nothing that I needed to do, right? And it looks like I indeed forgot some of the categories there. So there is no other in my table, right? So this is more accurate, okay? And then I want the number of occurrences or the counts or the frequencies of each of these purposes. So what I will do is I'm going to drag the loan purpose down to values. Okay, I will put it in values like this. Okay, and you can see that automatically the count of loan purpose is displayed for me. So now I have the purpose and the frequencies of these purposes. I didn't have to do anything, right? Compare this to what we did a few minutes ago, and you will notice the difference. This is much easier, and we did not need to do any kind of functions. Okay. So far, what have we learned? If you are using pivot tables, you need to have categories to summarize the data with. Okay, you need to have categories to summarize the data with. Okay, these categories go into the row section, right? And then the values, the numbers you want to use in order to the values or the numbers you want to summarize, you put them in the values. Okay, so the values contain the numbers you want to summarize. These are mostly numbers or count. Okay. Okay. So is this everything pivot table can do? No, pivot table can do more. Let's say that we don't just want to look at the number of occurrences of loan purposes. We want to look at the number of occurrences for loan purposes by credit risk. Okay, so I want to add credit risk as a second level of my report. How do I do this? Easy peasy. You click on credit risk and you drag it into columns. Okay. You will find that we have two columns created for us, one for high credit risk and one for low credit risk, and the number of business loan purposes is divided into high and low risks. Okay, and then we have the grand total to the right. Okay, so we use the columns if we want to create an additional layer or additional layer of reporting. Okay, like you see here. I can easily switch this, so I can move the credit risk here, okay, and move the credit purpose here, and I end up with the same thing, but rows are columns and columns are rows. Okay, let's put this back. You can have multiple column fields under rows. So if I put credit risk and low purpose under rows, you can see that we have two-level hierarchy. The credit risk, and below it the purpose, the loan purpose. Okay, so we can do it like that as well. Right. So what about filters? So now we know that the categories we are going to use to categorize our data goes into rows. The columns, if we want to add additional layers of reporting, the values are the numbers we are going to report. And what are the filters? Filters are exactly what their name means. Remember when we talked about filters in Excel, this is exactly what happens here. If I want to filter this by gender, for example, I want to know the number of loan types for males versus females. Okay, so I can go to filters here. So I can go to gender and drag it down into filters. And if you look at the top, you will see that a new filter showed up called gender. I can go here and select only females or only males, or I can select all, and therefore I can see a list of all my customers, right? So this is filter, right? So filter allows me to have a filter for my data, right? Let's get rid of this filter. Okay, right. So this is interesting. These are the basics of pivot tables. What else can we do with pivot tables? Let's do something else. Okay, so let me get rid of these values, count of loan purchases. Let's get rid of this. You will find that we have two fields or two columns. One is for the amount of money in checking accounts and the other in the amount of money in savings account, right? So let's say that I want to know the relationship between the money in the checking and savings account and the number of and the loans. Okay, so what loans have the biggest average in checking accounts and in saving accounts? So I'm going to drag checking account into values, and I'm going to check to move saving accounts into values as well. Okay, and let's get rid of this credit risk to make things simpler. Okay, so now I have the loan purpose and the sum of checking money, the sum of all the customers' checking accounts, and the sum for all customers' saving accounts. But this is not what I want. I don't want the sum. I want the average. Can I change it or not? Of course, I can change it. I can change anything with pivot tables, right? So if you can click in somewhere inside the column you want to change, and you can go to an option called value field settings. Okay, value field settings. If I click on value field settings, I will see I have a list of all the statistics I can use. So I can use a sum, a count, an average, max, mean. I can use whatever, right? So if I want to use the average, for example, and press OK, okay, I have the average of checking. So this is the average money in checking. If I want to know the maximum amount of money in the savings, I can right click here, go to value field settings, and click on max, okay, and press OK, and I have maximum of savings. Okay, so the average checking account for business loans, for example, is 1764. The maximum savings for business is 11,481. Right, this is not everything we can do with it, right? So if you look at the data, you will find that the savings and checking amounts are in dollars, right? But here in the pivot table, they are just in numbers, and the numbers look ugly. They don't look like any numbers we can use, right? So how can we change this? Easy peasy. Right click, go to value field settings, right? At the bottom of the value field settings, you'll find number, this button called number. Click it, and then select currency. And even if you want to remove decimal points altogether, so we can remove decimal points altogether, press OK, another OK, and we have a nice looking average with no decimal points, and we can use it to make decisions. Same things for maximum of savings. Right click, go to value field settings, number, currency, okay, and we have it in dollars and 2 decimal points. I did not change that. So the value field setting is very important when you are working with pivot table. You can use it to control how the values are displayed and what kind of statistic you want to display in your pivot table. Okay, so this is very, very important. Right. What else can we do with pivot tables? Lots of things. We can change the appearance or design of pivot tables. So if you click inside the pivot table and look above in the menu, you will find that we have two menus appearing for us. One is called pivot table analyze and one for design. If I click on design, you will see that I can change the design of my pivot table, the colors and design in so many ways. Okay. Okay, we can add branded rows, so the rows will be branded so they are easier to read. I can add branded columns. Okay, I can highlight row headers or unhighlight them. They are not highlighted anyway. Column headers I can uncheck, and the column headers